So, Bob, I have some emails from patrons, a lot actually,
Well,
and I thought we'd answer them. What do you say?
let's get through one of them.
Yeah. Anonymous Secretary Patron, he says, in your opinion, do you think there are more good or bad therapists in the world? Bob, what do you think?
Well, I don't know is the truth, but I don't trust anybody that I haven't vetted for myself. So I tend to take a very cautious view towards therapists that I don't know. But I know a lot of really good therapists, and I'm sure that my view of the universe is, limited. I just am cautious because I've heard so much about bad therapy that I'm careful.
Yeah. So if I were to, say you had to see a therapist, a new one, and you just randomly picked one from Psychology Today, the
Yeah.
database there, what would be the percentage chance that you think after 5 sessions you would find that therapist to be a good therapist?
Oh, that's a great question. 60%,
Yeah, okay. Okay.
60, 75, somewhere in there.
Yeah. Yeah. So why
What
do
would
you
you
think?
say?
Probably somewhere around there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do you think there are so many bad therapists?
Lack of
Because
training.
the classic thing before we get into this conversation is some therapists just aren't good matches with clients, right? So
Yeah.
it's always about a good fit.
Right.
But I also think there are just bad therapists out there. You just
Agreed.
hear these stories, and
Yeah.
so why are there so many bad therapists?
I think it's a combination of ego and training. People with a big ego don't seek training. They don't have enough humility and they think they know what they're doing. And so they don't look beyond themselves to continue their learning. What I've noticed about me is that training has been the single most transformative thing in helping me develop competence. But training, I had to seek all that after grad school. Grad school itself is insufficient for me to learn how to do what I learned how to do. So I'd say bad therapists phone in their training. They do the minimal amount, and they don't really pursue learning outside of whatever the license minimal whatever is.
Yeah, agreed. Another factor, having trained hundreds and hundreds of people, is some people are just talented when it comes to all the competencies required to be a quote unquote good therapist. There's so many different things you have to be good at. I think you have to be smart. You have to be empathic. You have to be psychologically minded. You have to be wise. You have to have been around the block a few times. You have to be curious. You have to be you have to be humble. You
Yeah.
have to be differentiated. You have to admit your own emotions. You have to be emotionally aware. You have to be dedicated to learning, because you can really phone it in graduate school and early career development. And I have found that some students, and it's really weird, I'll be teaching first quarter students, and within I don't know, 5 weeks, I can usually tell, like, oh, that person is going to go far in this field. I mean, they are already good. Like, they don't need a graduate degree. They're smart, they're talented, they're careful, they're thoughtful, they're wise, they understand what needs to be emphasized in the human personality so that healing can happen. They intuitively kind of get what needs to be said or what needs to be emphasized. They can sift through all of the cultural nonsense, like there's so many different things that our culture tells us about human beings that is destructive, and they've already been able to, before even going to graduate school, understand that a lot of those things are nonsense. And because being a therapist, it just involves so many different things, and so I think that in my experience, it has to do with that talent. And I'll teach students in their final quarters as well, and I'll find that that talent tends to stick with them, and really exponentially adds to their learning and their development as therapists. Whereas some people, they're more average or below average, and they have a hard time piecing things together. They get hung up on particular cultural things. They don't really integrate knowledge that well. They seem to be kind of lost a lot of the time. I mean, all students are lost. They all feel lost, but there's some students that seem particularly lost, particularly like out of touch. There'll be students I'll be teaching in the final a couple quarters, and they'll say something that will reveal a certain unsophistication, and I'm like, whoa, like you've got a long way to go. And they probably will. Now, will that person be a terrible therapist? I don't know. I don't think so. I think that the people I've trained have all done great work at internship and stuff. But I think that of the therapists that I've gone to that I've really liked, I'm guessing, were one of those students that impressed their professors right from the beginning. Just a level of sophistication and personal awareness and attachment mindedness that I think was, I don't know, kind of innate or something. Another question from Z from Singapore, good old Z from Singapore. She says, what would be the moral approach towards someone with a personality disorder? Would it be wrong to see it as a potential red flag or safety concern and therefore tread carefully moving forward? Or are we then contributing to existing stigma? Personality disorders are also largely harmless in the sense that they would not likely cause someone to criminally harm me. But I've noticed more and more now that the media is portraying these disorders as a reason for criminality. But what do we do with the information when we discover a personality disorder at the beginning? I would not be surprised if a sizable number of people would tell me to write off people immediately. End of email. What I'm guessing Z is talking about is like dating or friends or people at work or something. With all the internet talk or in the media about, that person has narcissistic personality or that abusive borderline person, and we've talked about that stigma before. And so on one hand, Z is saying, we understand that personality disorders are largely harmless, but there are some concerns. So Bob, what do you think? So say you go on a few dates with someone and they say they have borderline or narcissism or something. What should that person do?
Should the person continue to date? Do you like them? That's probably a good place to start. If you like them, maybe it's worth having another date, or maybe you could just talk about, what does that really mean? Like, how does it show up? What could a person reasonably expect? Or sorry, let me try that again. What could I reasonably expect if, like when we get in a fight, say, what's happened in the past? What are the vulnerable spots in relationship? What are the triggers? But I think the main thing is do you like them? If you like them, why don't you see? If you don't like them, fine. There's lots of other fish.
Yeah. I would say that everyone is on a spectrum of at least one personality disorder. So the notion of differentiating between those with and without is a little meaningless. And if I found out, if someone told me that they had borderline, I would feel very safe around them, because for someone to say that means they've done a lot of personal work. They've done a lot of self-discovery. They're taking extreme responsibility for themselves. Yeah. Does that mean that think it's going to be smooth sailing with them? Maybe not. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But if someone said that, now if I discovered someone had a personality disorder and I knew they didn't know they had a personality disorder, that's a completely different thing. If I'm, I don't know, I have a coworker and over time I'm like, oh, that person has this or that. Because personality disorders cause distortions. They cause perceptual problems, sometimes in relationships, sometimes they'll be directed towards you. And if someone, and this has happened to me in my personal life and at work and whatnot, where some students, honestly, will see me as done something terribly, terribly wrong to them when, like, I'll give a specific example. This was years ago, but a student came to me and wanted me to supervise her and at this other project thing. And I had just been told by the university and by my boss that I couldn't do that sort of work anymore. It was just it wasn't an option. It was like against the rules to agree to it. And so she came to me and she said, could you supervise me at this other project? And I said, I'm sorry, I can't do that because the university says we can't do that anymore. And she proceeded to, I don't know how to say it. It was a short bullying moment, but my heart was racing. I don't exactly know what happened, but she scared me. Like it was mildly traumatic. This was 20 years or 15 years ago or something. I can remember it like it was yesterday because it was a very short conversation, and it was over such a mundane thing. And it was so cut and dry. And I didn't even have a history with her. It wasn't like this was the straw on the camel's back. I barely knew her as far as I know. And she just, she got red in the face. She was raging at me. And I was like, whoa, what's happening? And it was scary. And I don't know what she suffered from. Might she had a personality disorder? I don't know, but it's possible. And in those moments, I, to myself, say, I have to be careful around that person, because I don't have the sort of relationship where I can just, like as a therapist-client relationship or a friend, where I can really sit down for several hours at a time and discuss everything that's happening, because I want to feel safe. That's a big part of my my needs is, I need to feel like I'm safe to be myself and safe to reiterate a rule that the university has given me. And if I don't feel safe, then I don't feel good, and I don't want to be in those situations. So if I suspected someone had a personality disorder, which I have at times, and I don't think they understand that, then I'm definitely going to be extremely careful, and maybe even to the point where I avoid them. Now, does that mean that all people with personality disorders are going to be like that? No. There are plenty of people with all sorts of personality disorders, borderline included, who would never do anything like that to me because I just don't trigger them in that way, or they're aware enough or whatever. So that's my long answer to that short question. Anything to add to that, Bob?
Oh, yeah. Let's not presuppose that people with personality disorders are dangerous. Sometimes you just don't like people. Those are the ones to avoid. People you don't like. If you don't like them, yeah, great. Don't hang out.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The idea that personality disorders are associated with criminality, there's a much higher association between criminality and being men. So by that rubric, you should be avoiding men like 100 times more likely than you should be avoiding people with personality disorders. So, and we don't do that because you understand that the vast majority of men are not going to hurt you in a criminal way. And so the same goes for personality disorder. Is there a slight increase of risk of criminality among, and then what do we mean by criminality? Are we talking about like theft, or are we talking about like murder or something? Mm. So certainly there isn't that association. There shouldn't be that association. But of course, that's what the media always says. It's like, oh, this person went on a killing spree. They had autism. It's like, well, why are you pointing that out? Like that has nothing to do with it. Mm-hmm. That person went on a killing spree. They had bipolar. Or that person went on a killing spree. They had schizophrenia, for that matter. It's like, okay, maybe that's a detail, but I know what you're doing. You're telling a cause. You're proposing a cause. It's like, why aren't you focusing on this guy went on a killing spree? He happens to be 5'9". Like, do we blame it on the fact that he's 5'9"? It's like, well, people that are shorter than 6 foot are more likely to commit crimes. Well, okay, but everyone understands it's not like the reason why the person did that for reasons completely outside of whether they had autism or schizophrenia or whatever. And also outside of the fact that they were 5'9". Like, stop pointing that out. Anyway, patron Justine from Nevada says, can you talk about the No Surprises Act? Do you think this will help or hurt our clientele caseload? Bob, do you know about the No Surprises Act?
No, I do not.
So you haven't even heard of it?
I never heard of this. That's a surprise to me right now.
That's funny. So, God, this really points to, so this is a new federal law that you have to follow as a therapist.
Okay.
And it's interesting that no one would have notified you, and no one notified me. The only reason why I know about it, because I'm still kind of in the mix of, and academia, and there's rumors but I just wonder how many private practice, because it really applies to private practicing therapists the most in some ways.
It's the first I've heard of it, period.
Yeah. Well, it's only a couple of weeks into it. So, and it's not dire, but it's creating all these problems or these worries because the feds passed this law called the No Surprises Act, which applies to, I'll describe it. So this will be your training, Bob. And as a caveat, I'm not an expert on it. One, two, I'm not even a supervisor anymore. So I don't really have that drive to know these laws forwards and backwards. I mean, back when I was a supervisor, which I stopped a year ago, which seems like just yesterday, I used to really dedicate myself to knowing the law and the ethical codes and all the ins and outs, like forwards and backwards. And I would have done that for this if I was still a supervisor, but I'm not anyway. So yeah, there's a ton of anxiety. There's all these Facebook posts of therapists going like, what are we supposed to do? I don't like this, because therapists are really terrible when it comes to regulations and law. And they're just paranoid about being sued, and they aren't really legally minded, regulation minded. Therapists tend to be kind of loose and flexible, if you will, and it's hard for them to be rigid to the law. And so there's all these people just like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I hate this. I'm going to stop becoming a therapist because I can't stand these regulations anymore. And I'm like, and I looked into it and I'm like, it's no big deal. It's just another disclosure statement element that you have to add. Anyway, so here's as far as I can see what it involves. Started this month, January 2022. It applies to all medical services, including mental health. What it's trying to address is that people were inadvertently receiving care from out-of-network providers when they thought it was in-network. So mainly in the medical field. So for example, you go to the emergency room and you think that the hospital is covered under your insurance, but they bring in a doc from outside the hospital who does like anesthesia or something else. And that doc is not covered by your insurance, is not a preferred provider. And boom, you get hit with this huge medical bill because that person was out of network. And it was never told to you. No one ever came to you and said, this person is not in your network. They're in our hospital, but they're not in our network. And so these people were like, I thought I was in network. I went to the hospital that I normally go to, and this random person came in. I figured it was another person. You don't think to ask as a patient. You're not going to be like, hey, you don't ask every nurse and every doc and every tech, like, are you covered by my insurance? Like it shouldn't be your responsibility. And it's a product of our ridiculous American system, by the way. But anyway, studies found that about 1 in 5 emergency room visits actually had an element to that. That's a high percentage. That 20% of people who go to the emergency room get slapped with a $10,000 bill that they thought they were in network when they were out of network. So yeah. The other thing is some people don't even really understand what in network and out of network even means. As a patient, you're just, especially if you don't use insurance very often, you're like, what do you mean in network? I don't even understand. It can be really confusing. So, what they decided to do is the feds passed this law saying that medical providers have to inform, which makes total sense, right? That you can't not inform the patient about and then there's a broader question. There's a broader thing they're trying to address, which is sometimes patients will ask for something like an MRI or a surgery or something, and no one ever sits down and says, this is how much it's going to cost you. The surgery is going to cost $25,000. Your insurance covers only 60% of that, which means you're going to have to pay, what is that, like $6,000 or something. And some people, it's not ever told to them, or they have an ambulance ride from their house and it costs them 15 grand, but they never thought it was actually going to cost that much. And then they're bankrupt because of this and that. And so it's all this effort of like, hey, people need to know what they're getting into bill wise before they agree to treatment. And it gives them the opportunity to maybe seek another practitioner. If you're like, oh, this is going to cost you X amount of dollars, you're like, wait, well, so if I go around the corner to someone else that actually is in network, it's only going to cost me a $20 copay. It's informing the patient, and it makes total sense. And the fact that the medical community at times, I'm sure it's not rampant, but at times gets away with this, is criminal and really just anti-consumer and just really ridiculous. I mean, when was the last time, Bob, you went to a doctor or a hospital or something and they like told you up front, this is how much it's going to cost you?
Oh, never.
Yeah, never. That's never a thing. It's maybe buried in some disclosure statement in the fine print or something, but I've never had someone say, maybe like at the dentist, they'll say that sometimes, they'll kind of go over that with me. But, and so now, luckily for me, it's never been a huge problem. Although I did take an ambulance in New Orleans because I had an allergic reaction, and but I sort of knew like, oh, this is gonna be big. This is gonna be a bill. Like, this is not gonna be pleasant. But I'm like, I don't care. Get me to the hospital. So I kind of was bracing for that, and it wasn't a great bill when I got it in the mail. But anyway.
Well, I've had a couple of clients over the years that are doctors and that work in hospitals. One of them was an emergency room doctor and the other one was a medical unit doctor. And they are actually members of a practice that contracts with the hospital to work there, but they are not employees of the hospital.
Right.
And so they may or may not be impaneled on, one person's insurance. So the hospital might accept the insurance, which will cover, medical procedures that take place there and, staff that actually work there, nursing staff that work there, whatever, but not the doctors that's separate. I think it happens a lot.
Yeah.
And, like, woof, what are you supposed to, you go there, you get treated by the doc. You don't ask who it is. In fact, you're actually usually just glad someone was there, like helping you out or whatever. You don't think to ask them, hey, do you work here?
Right. But, or how much is this going to, even if you work here, how much is this going to cost?
It's going to cost me. Yeah.
Exactly. So this applies much more to the medical field, which is good, but it also applies to private practicing therapists like you and me. And we have to follow this law, like we have to follow HIPAA or something.
Right.
And since therapists are isolated, they apparently aren't going to be informed about this. And two, won't have a billing staff that can learn how to, navigate this sort of thing. So, and therapists, like I said, are paranoid about regulations. They get all kind of stopped up. And what I see therapists doing is like, oh my God, I'm going to go to jail. I give up, and it's like, no, like just take your time. No one's out to get you. Something very, very weird would have to happen for something even negative to happen, particularly at this phase. I mean, I'm sure the feds and whatever regulatory boards are understanding that therapists are going to take it's going to take a few years for this to kind of iron itself out to some extent. So, just relax. It's okay. It's pretty simple. So essentially, as far as I can tell, and I'm not an expert, we are required to inform uninsured and self-paid individuals that of their ability to receive a good faith estimate of expected charges. That's what they call it, a good faith estimate. It's an estimate, and it's in good faith, meaning you're really doing your best to try to estimate to the patient, the client, what their costs are going to be. You have to do it both orally and in writing, by the way, which is kind of interesting. And it has to go in their client file. And there are boilerplate notices available, by the way. So, there are two things that I think therapists are supposed to do. And again, I'm not an expert, but one is that you have a good faith estimate that you give to clients. And let me give you an example. I anticipate your treatment will require weekly 50-minute psychotherapy sessions for 12 months at $200 per session. So that's all you need to say. I anticipate, based on what you've told me, that your treatment will require, weekly sessions for 12 months at $200 a session for a total of whatever that, equates to. That's it. It's not like pages and pages of like treatment planning and pages of justification. It's just like, based on what you told me, here's how much it's going to cost you. And here's how long it's going to take. So that's it. That's all you got to do. The other thing, and it has to be in writing and orally, they have to sign it, I think, I'm guessing. And then that goes in the client file. So you could easily do that at the beginning of treatment. You could easily have pretty much a standard, a good faith estimate, I wouldn't be surprised if, for example, you, Bob, every single good faith estimate you have is something along those lines, and it always looks the same. I mean, it'd have to be something really weird, like someone comes in and says, I want 5 sessions of kind of self-esteem work, and then it would kind of change that good faith estimate. But I'm guessing most clients come in, couples and individuals for you, that you're going to estimate like, yeah, this is going to take a while. And so, let's estimate for a year and then reevaluate at that point. So it needs to be a they need to be notified of expected changes. So if you're planning on raising your rates at some point in the future, it should be in there, like at this date, I'm planning on raising my rates. It's given once to the client. So yeah, you just give it at the beginning, and then if nothing ever changes, then you don't have to do anything. The other thing, so that's one thing, is that good faith estimate that you give the client orally and written, put it in the file. Another thing is you have to have a notice of protections against surprise billing that needs to be posted in your office and on your website, and probably given to clients on the beginning. But since for you, Bob, and me, we have to be giving our clients this now, since this is a new thing, even clients midstream, right? So all of our clients, Bob, we have to, one, give this notice of protections against surprise billing, which is there's just a boilerplate. I'm sure you could alter it if you wanted to, but it's just a boilerplate note disclosure. And then 2, you and I have to, orally and in writing, tell all of our clients how much their treatment is going to cost them over, a year's span of time. I mean, I suppose, like for me, with some of my clients tend to be pretty long-term. I would say my estimate would be something like, I anticipate your treatment will take 15 years at X amount of sessions per month at X amount per session. You know what I mean? Like, and that'd be fine as long as you inform and the client signs it. And at some point, based on inflation, I might raise those rates, and that's all that's required. You're not going to go to jail. Everything's fine. So now in the good faith estimate, I gave you the kind of, the specific thing you tell the clients, but you also have to have the patient name and date of birth, description of the service in clear and understandable language, applicable diagnoses codes, expected service codes, expected charges, your name, your NPI, your TIN, and there's some other disclaimers that need to be in there, but you can just Google it, and there's standard boilerplate examples. Bob, what do you think about that?
It's annoying. It makes me tired.
See, I think, that's another barrier, right? So many private practice therapists are just like, more busy work, right? Yeah, like I'm going to have to spend 5 hours kind of researching this and making sure it's all up to snuff and bothering all my clients with this. None of them are going to care. We got to, the feds have passed down this decree, and now I've got to interrupt every session with every client with this stupid thing. Got to put it in this file. I got to update my website, and I've got to change my, yeah, I get that for sure. But can you see how therapists would get like all?
Yeah, because it's not like appendectomy, it has a beginning and an end, right? Like therapy, 15 years, right? Or 10 or 5 or whatever it is, but it's not like appendectomy. It's going to be next Thursday, and you leave the hospital the next day and it's over,
Right. Well, I think it also gets therapists worried because I think it touches on an insecurity that a lot of therapists have, which is they don't believe their service is worth it anyway.
Right.
And to officially write down and remind everyone, like, you're paying money for this service.
Right.
It alerts the therapist to ask us question of like, am I worth it?
Am I worth it? Yeah.
Is this actually doing anything?
Right.
And if you're insecure, then you're going to flip out, because it's just one of those things you try to avoid. Yeah. And along these lines, while we're on this topic, is, really good therapists ask their clients periodically, what do you think about therapy? Insecure therapists don't ask that question because they're worried about the answer. So if you want, and outcomes show that even just asking the question without even listening to the answer improves outcomes. But particularly if you listen to the answer that the client says and actually adjust your therapy to the client, it improves outcomes even more. So getting feedback is an evidence-based practice that is incredibly helpful and useful. And I found that the more confidence I got, the more able I was to ask that question. In the beginning of my career, like that was a hard question for me to ask. Anyway.
Yeah.
So again, I'm not an expert. I'm just telling you as a fellow therapist out there. I used to be a supervisor in this area. I'm no longer. And I really kind of like the freedom of that because I took being a supervisor very seriously. I really wanted to be where the buck stopped with me kind of a thing. If someone had a problem with the law or their ethics or something, then I felt like Bob's bumping around. Oh, Bob has our book that he's showing.
Your book, not my book.
Well, you helped.
I read it a couple of times, but no, this is your book.
Yeah.
Multi-role clinical supervision by Kirk Honda.
Right. So one of the chapters is on, because there's so many different things you have to be as a supervisor. And one of the things you have to be is an administrator and an understanding of ethics and a guide regarding ethics and law and everything. And so understanding that, I took very seriously. And when I was a supervisor, all these things I just had to know forwards and backwards so that I could help all of my supervisees to it. But now, Bob, I don't got to do crap anymore. Like I am off the hook. I don't have to learn anything anymore, which is ironic because I write this book on supervision. And then a couple of years later, I stopped becoming a supervisor.
Are you going to do a second? Are you going to do an update?
Like a second volume where I just say it's too much work. Stop being a supervisor. Wait, are you a supervisor?
No.
Because you toyed around with being a supervisor.
I did.
You've always said that you wanted to avoid it because it was too much pressure.
Yeah. And then I looked into it and I was considering it for a while, but the AA MFT won't, I don't have a license that they'll consider as will help students get to CMFT. Is that
right.
the word? Is that what it's called?
MFT.
So anyways, I can't help somebody get whatever certification that you get because I'm a licensed mental health counselor.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, you didn't have to become you can become a supervisor without, but I guess it's easier to get supervisees if you can help them get their license.
Right. I can't help them get a license. So I decided not to do it.
You didn't think about becoming a supervisor to counselors?
No, because I don't do personal counseling much anymore.
It's all couples?
It's all couples. Like 95% of what I do is couple therapy now.
I think you might have told me that, but I forgot. Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Look at me.
Look at
this
you.
Whole long way. And I ended up doing what you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, I think you ended up doing more what I did.
I mean, in terms of individuals, but I still work relationally,
No, of course you do. No, I do. But like of your practice these days, what's the percent that's individuals versus couples?
It's mostly couples.
Families.
Yeah, it's a vast.
Oh, it is?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I had in my head that actually we had sort of switched places and you were doing mostly personal counseling.
Well, maybe a few years ago it was like half and half.
Half and half, yeah.
But more recently, yeah, it's vast majority couples. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about that. There's interesting things that I think about sometimes about like the makeup of my current client population. Like the other, I don't know, it was a few months ago, I was talking with someone, maybe you, maybe even on the podcast. And I just did a mental note of ethnicity. And I was like, oh, almost all my clients are people of color. Yeah. Like, and well, actually, let me think. Yeah, almost all of them. And a lot of Asians and Asian Americans. And it just never really occurred to me to think about that, Anyway, more deserving listener, Scott from Virginia Beach, he says, I have the opportunity to do my residency as a therapist at both a private practice and a city agency. I can only choose one though. which do you think would provide a better therapeutic experience as a therapist? Bob, what do you think?
What do you want to do when you get out of school is
Right.
probably more relevant than where you go. If you
I
want to
mean,
work.
for sure, that's one. I'll just asterisk that for a second, because some people will be like, they'll be at an agency and they'll be like, but I really want to go into private practice. Is that going to hinder me? And I'm like, no, your internship is but a blip in a long career. So
That's true.
I wouldn't worry about it. So, people get real like uptight about like, I need to make my internship exactly in line with my career path. And I'm just like, look, graduate, because when people really try to tailor their internship, sometimes they don't get the hours they need, or they have this really weird, wonky experience, and it extends their degree another year or something. And I'm just like, just get the standard internship that your program tends to do. Maybe it won't be in the population people or the setting that you're really digging, but as soon as you graduate, boom, you can do whatever you want.
Right.
At that point, it's so
you're going to be doing a lot of training anyway. So
right. But but I think they're thinking, more deserving listener Scott from Virginia Beach, he's thinking, what's going to make me a better therapist? What do you think? Private practice or agency?
it depends on the quality of the supervision, I think. Well, I mean, it's probably a lot of things like better therapists. I don't know. Keep learning something. Like the thing that somebody told me once is, Bob, figure out what it is that you're interested in and go be an expert at it. Just study your butt off, become an expert at it, and then become known to do that. And it didn't really have much to do with what I learned in my internship.
Yeah.
In fact, when I was doing my internship, did I ever tell you this story?
I don't know.
It was 3 quarters. Oh, yeah, right. How would you know? It was 3. I was going to be there for 3 quarters, and I had to get 300 hours, which is considered. I mean, imagine nowadays it's like probably double that now.
I think counselors is still 300 hours actually. Yeah, and I think MFTs have reduced their hours to 300.
Oh, because yours used to be 500, I think.
For many years.
Yeah. So in the first quarter, I got 11 hours.
Yeah.
So I spent the next 2 quarters taking every possible case I could. It didn't matter who. I just made the rounds at the clinic. I'm like, I'm interested.
Yeah, that's almost a universal. In fact, I did a whole research study on all of our students regarding their the progression of their hours, and the first quarter was somewhere between like 10 or 20 hours, even when you need to get 500 hours.
Right.
And I always, because I was ground level with a lot of these interns, and the explanation, my speculation is that it takes agencies 3 months to get acclimated to the fact that you're working there. It's like in the beginning, they just don't, because they have the clients, but they just don't give them to you because you don't occur to them. Whereas later on, you definitely do occur to them, and then you start getting them. Anyway, you were saying.
Oh yeah, no. So 6 months, I did the majority of my hours, 190 of them or 290 of them. I just made it a full-time job, essentially is what I did.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
but I guess my point was, though, I took every case I could. It didn't matter what it was, didn't matter who it was. I wasn't thinking about population or anything beyond just completing my hours to complete my degree.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you learn a lot with those clients?
Yeah, a lot. No, I don't think I learned a lot. I learned something, but it was just 6 months. So, I mean, it takes a while to learn.
And you were working a lot with med management folks
that were there for med management, but I actually was working with children and families for maybe about half of it.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Yeah. I'm sure you told me that before, but I forget. I need to keep a resume of yours next to mine anyway. So what I would say to this is private practice is very different from working at an agency.
Yeah.
If it was me, given my desires and given how Seattle is, I would definitely, I don't know. I mean, at first I was like, I would definitely take an internship at a private practice because it would probably be a lot more relaxed, a lot more boutique. The clients would probably be a lot more interested in therapy. The clients would probably be more, psychologically minded, because agencies, it's a lot of people who are court ordered, a lot of people who are being dragged into therapy by their parents. And whereas private practice can be that, but it's less likely to be that way. In private practice, you have a lot of clients who are, at least paying a copay, and they're motivated. They're trying to make it work. So on one hand, I was like, well, my gut would say work at an agency or work in a private practice, but then the value of working at an agency is sort of intangible. There are things that I learned because I worked at an agency because I was an intern and then I got hired. So I worked there for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. And I learned a lot, like a lot of the things that I understand today about humans and therapy and the industry happened at the agency and would not have happened if I was at a private practice facility. So if I were to go back, Scott, if you're planning on becoming a private practitioner, I would consider working at an agency just to get a feel for what it's like, just to get an understanding of like how the government works and how courts work and how, DSHS and medical coupons and, just to get on a feel for all that stuff. Cause I think that it's helpful to understand. Whereas, but if you're looking for a more potentially relaxing time, private practice is probably the way to go. The other thing is that agencies often will provide a very wide variety of people. There's a real, there's a lot of representation. So that's another potential. But of course, you're working with a lot of other clinicians, and you get to hear their opinions and that sort of thing. Anyway, let's take a break. What do you say, Bob? And get back more emails.
Yes.
All right, we're back from the break. Bob, another email, anonymous annual upper tier patron. That's really just the best. You're not only your upper tier patron, but you're an annual patron. She says, when someone writes in with a question about something happening in their relationship with their therapist, you regularly advise listeners to bring it up with your therapist. I started to wonder whether bringing up these topics with a therapist feels unnatural to everyone. Or is it just those of us who have some relational traumas who we are working against? End of question. So I think this is an interesting question, because what she's asking is, it seems like a lot of people are not bringing stuff up with their therapist that they probably should be. And we seem to be operating under the assumption, or I don't know, I shouldn't say that, but is it that only people with relational traumas hold things back and have a hard time? Or is this really true for everyone? Because it's just part of the discomfort of telling someone about something that you're not proud of, or that you're scared is going to cause a fight or something. What do you think, Bob? Is it hard for everyone?
I think it's hard for everyone.
Any thoughts on that, since we're on a podcast and it requires you to talk?
Well, let's see. You know what I had for breakfast today? I think it's hard for everybody. I suppose it's probably harder for folks with relational trauma. But we get this interesting thing here where people write in and they say, well, here's what's going on in therapy that I don't like. And implicit in the notes that they send our way is that they are not talking about it in personal counseling. And so, yeah, absolutely. Anything can be talked about in therapy. Anything can be talked about in therapy. Anything can be talked about in therapy. So what I've noticed, though, is that in my own personal work and in my working with my clients, that the more we can be focused on, no, that's not the word. The more we can actually pay attention to explicitly what's happening between us in our interaction, the more my people get out of it. So like somebody might come and they might say, well, I'm having this problem with my spouse. And what I have learned to do, it's not easy, but is to shift focus on what's being expressed right now. Like right now, you're telling me about your spouse. What is it that's wanted right now that does not speak its own name? So like, are you wanting advice? What would it be like to actually say you're wanting advice? What would it be like to declare to me that that's what you want me to do? And what I've discovered is that that's actually really hard for people to do.
Right.
Me included. And yet really beneficial, because that can generalize to being able to express one's position, one's feeling, one's desire in the relationship that, like say in this case with spouse. So it might be that I come and I sit and I say, well, blah, 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 and this is a problem with my spouse, but I don't talk to my spouse about it because it's really scary for me to talk to my spouse about what's happening with my spouse. What better way to learn that than talk to my therapist about what's happening with my therapist?
Right. Yeah, I'll say for myself, who I don't consider myself to be terribly relationally traumatized, it's hard for me to bring up tense topics, uncomfortable topics with my therapists. So I think it's a pretty universal thing. And that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that because we're often saying, bring it up with therapists. And I'm often assuming that this is an outgrowth of their relational traumas, their personality issue. It never occurred to me to think, well, maybe this is hard for everyone, including me. And I think it is important that therapists actually ask those questions, like you said, Bob, that because I think about my own clients and I think about how many of them probably have had thoughts that crossed their mind that they thought, maybe I should say something and didn't, because it's not very frequent that clients will tell me like something that I would put in this category. And I also think about the times where I will explicitly ask a question about if they have any complaints about me or any thoughts about me, or what do you think is going on in my head? One of those therapeutic relationship oriented questions that there's always something that's happening. And of course there is, of course, every client has ongoing pros and cons going through their mind about us, and how useful it is to talk about that, and how even those people who are confident are not going to volunteer that, and how important it is for us therapists to actually create a space for that to happen. Right.
Yeah.
And I think it needs to be repeatedly. I think you can't just ask that once a year.
Nope.
It's got to be like,
yeah. Agree.
Another question from the same person: the offer of a secure attachment from my therapist terrifies me. More than 18 months in, I'm only just starting to let myself feel a little bit of the longing and dependency that I've denied for so long. He is patient and warm, and yet I feel extreme anxiety every time I think about it, which is constantly, to the point I wonder how so many people are in therapy and continue to function in their day-to-day lives. My question is the relationship between therapist and client less intense if the client has had previous secure attachments? Bob, what do you think?
Probably it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I should say more, right?
Yeah. We're on a podcast, Bob. It's a lot more than, it's an open-ended question.
Okay.
We got a lot of minutes to fill. So,
okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah. I actually think it probably is more difficult. Wait, what was the question again?
Is the relationship between the therapist and client less intense if the client has had previous secure attachments?
Yeah, I think it's probably less intense. Or maybe a better way to put it is it has less fear surrounded around the actual reflection on the relationship itself. But I think it's always going to be anxious, and because it's the nature of humans to be insecure. So the words I want are two of the most vulnerable words in the English language, in my opinion, and they're vulnerable for everybody. My teacher said to me, Bob, intimacy is like jumping off a cliff. It's like that way for everybody. It's going to be like that way. I imagine it's going to be like that way, even if a person has a secure attachment. What they have going for themselves, though, is a felt sense experience of it working out well when they take the leap. They've had the experience of being caught, whereas folks with trauma history or insecure attachment style or whatever haven't had that at all, or not much. So it's still scary, but there's nothing like experience as a teacher.
Yeah. Agreed. I think that what you're talking about, anonymous annual upper tier patron, is what we're often talking about in terms of relational traumas being triggered and the longing, and how intense that can feel for people who have more attachment injuries and more attachment insecurity. The relationship can be intense for anyone, regardless, but it's particularly fraught and desperate for those who have had limited to no secure attachments in their life, because they have the feeling and the longing that of a 2-year-old child. And the longing of a 2-year-old child is all encompassing. When a 2-year-old child reaches out and is crying and is desperately wanting to be held and be made to feel secure, it is not just a mild experience. It is all encompassing. It's completely undifferentiated. And that feeling is within a lot of people who have never had that satisfied. It's yet to be satisfied, and it'll emerge with your therapist, and it's intense and it's weird, because you're like 35 and you're thinking, why is this happening to me? But it is. And if you're with a therapist that is wise, then, you're on the right path. It takes years though, right? Up tier patron Aaron from Berkeley says, it always kind of wigs me out that Berkeley has another E in there. Berkeley. It should be Berkeley, not Berkeley, right?
I don't know. I say iron, but I think it's iron.
Yeah, why do you say iron?
I'm very literal. There's no good reason for me to do it. I know the word is generally pronounced iron.
I will say that iron is one of the hardest words to teach someone that doesn't speak English as a native. Like sure. I had a friend who was Japanese, and she would say iron, and I'm like, yeah, I know that's how it looks, right. But it's iron. And she's like, iron. I'm like, no, iron. And because if you spell out iron,
yeah,
it's what is it? How do you is it AI? Is that how you formally?
I would say AY.
AY. That's A. That's A though.
Well, right, but I captain is AYE. So
yeah.
But okay, but IUER.
There's a Y. Is there a Y? I yearn. No, it's not I yearn. It's I earn. So I would go AIERN. Maybe a dash. AI dash ERN. Iron. But well, it's not I yearn.
But it's just a syllable thing. Yeah. Like iron as opposed to I yearn.
Right. Well, there's no Y in there. There's anyway.
Iron. Yeah, it's true. There's no Y. Iron.
It's like, why is it iron? It's more I run, anyway.
Hey, we went to Paris and we wanted to go to Champagne country.
Yeah.
Which is in a part of France called Reims. Rhymes with France. And it's spelled I think it's RHEIM like Mary S. Spelled rhymes. Or is it REIMS? REIMS, right? It's spelled rhymes. So we went to the train station. We don't speak French. And we told the attendant that we wanted to go to Rhymes. And honest to God, she looked at us like, what are you talking about?
How's it pronounced?
Reims.
Reims.
Yeah, like the way you'd say France. France.
I feel like regardless of how it's spelled in French, it's always some kind of It's always some kind of oomph. Like it doesn't matter how it's spelled. Like there could be X's and U's and E's and O's. It's always like some version of
yeah. So I asked our landlord when we got back to Paris, I'm like, why is it pronounced Reims when it's spelled this other way? And she goes, is that the French language? And she seemed annoyed with my question. So anyways, iron is like Reims.
Right.
If you're not from there, you ain't gonna know how to say it.
Yeah. We have, because our language comes a lot from French to some extent. So we have all this like weird spelling.
Yeah.
Which really bothered me as a kid, so Bob, I'll talk about this another time. I don't want to talk about it today. I'm sure it'll come up. Up to your patron, Aaron from Berkeley. She says, my parents divorced when I was 3. And since then I've spent maybe 75% of the year at my mom's house in California and 25% at my dad's in Connecticut. I've always felt indifferent at best towards my dad, and I hated visiting him over breaks. I even wished he'd die when I was little so I wouldn't have to go, which I now feel terribly guilty about. My dad is a great guy and has a good relationship with my mom. She never talked bad about him and worked to facilitate visits. So am I a horrible person, or could early physical separation have caused my lack of innate affection for him? Bob, what do you think?
Yeah, exactly. Hey, you're not a horrible person. So what? So you had that kind of thought. That's just being a kid, man. That's just being a kid. And your kid has this sort of Lego block solution for how to not have to go to your dad's. Well, if he died, right? Because it's actually true, right? If he did pass on, then you would, but that doesn't mean that you wish for him to be dead. It means you wish actually to not go across the country for your break, right? It's just the key isn't in the means, it's the end. The end is to stay in Berkeley, stay in California.
Yeah.
To avoid having to go to Connecticut. And your brain just has this sort of way of making it happen, but it doesn't mean anything other than that.
Did you ever want your parents to die when you were a kid?
No, I can't say that I didn't have that thought. No.
I mean, I didn't have that extreme, but I do remember being upset at my parents and wishing they get run over by a truck. Like I remember in my head going, I wish they get run over by a truck because I was so upset,
Sure. It sounds like just a regular kid thing.
Yeah.
Why a truck though?
I don't know. In my head, I think it was like, well, that'll take you out, I guess. You get hit by a sedan, like you might still live, but you get hit by a truck.
What kind of truck do you have?
Like a delivery truck kind of thing, like a plumber's truck or something.
Yeah.
But I was just, Aaron, it's possible. So I'm guessing it's real complicated, Aaron. So you're telling me that your parents divorced when you were 3 and your dad moved across the country and your parents are both nice people. You're like, I don't understand why I hate my dad. Or feel indifferent about him. So one, there's a possibility that you were picking up on things that were nonverbal and it resulted in indifference or hatred towards your dad. You could have been picking up on the fact that your dad might have had a hard time bonding with you when you were young. And even though he's a nice guy, it's like there's not really a bond there. It could just be a product of the fact that you only saw him a couple months out of the year. And it took 2 months just to kind of get to know each other. It could be the fact that you're being separated from your mom, who is your primary parent at that point, and being ripped away and sent to your dad's house. There's just a lot of different family systems things that could be coming up. So it's hard to know, but it is what it is. And, I don't think anyone's going to blame you for it. Up at your patron, Gabriella from Richmond, Virginia, says, I suffer from tremendous self-doubt, likely as a result of having undiagnosed ADHD, which got me reprimanded a lot in a way that was very confusing. And growing up in a dysfunctional family where criticism, abuse, neglect, and bouts of overfunctioning behavior from my parents were all common. Sometimes I feel like the self-doubt is who I am because it's been with me for so long, but I know that's not the case. And I have been in therapy for a few years now. Could you talk about self-doubt, particularly self-doubt that is a product of things like abuse and neglect? Can you talk about the process of separating yourself from negative or limiting thoughts and opinions about yourself? Bob, what do you think?
No, we can't talk about separating yourself because these are the things that your mind has evolved to help you survive. Self-doubt is it's a product of the kind of the messages that you get from, people, and people with ADHD. It's almost endemic, like this sense of, you're not like the other kids who can, function in school because they don't have trouble with attention wandering or restless body or whatever. People that grow up with ADD, it's probably less nowadays, but I can't imagine it's all that much less because we're a little bit more sophisticated with our children these days, but not much. They almost always feel bad about themselves because their bodies simply will not permit them to function in the same way as other kids. And so they get this message that they're an annoyance because other people act in a way that's annoyed. They're annoyed because, I'm not sitting still, or I'm not focused on my work the way, the other 24 kids in the class are. If I could, I would, because it isn't like anybody would choose this stuff. It's painful for the kid. And so they get this message that, they're bad or wrong and they shouldn't. So the brain learns to just kind of subsume that and then walk around with it and have that kind of image of self. Because to actually have confidence and to believe that the problem here isn't that I'm bad. The problem is that my caregiver, a teacher, a parent, or whoever, is to believe that they are the problem is far more scary than to believe that I'm the problem. So no, you can't separate from it. But what you could do, I think, is you could play with the idea of what would it be like to act with confidence? And what would it be like to live scared, what would it be like to step anyways, even though self-doubt says, no, don't do that. Nope, don't do that. Nope, if you do that, nope, if you do that, this bad thing's going to happen, blah, 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 right? To step anyways, to step into action that, you might have People are really good at this. They have a hard time. They have blind spots with themselves, but they're often very good at giving advice to others, full of sanity and wisdom and so forth. But to act the way you'd coach your best friend to act, or your own kid if you had a kid, to do that and be in self-doubt, to like have that be part of the thing, because at this point in life, it is part of the thing. But it doesn't mean that you're not stepping properly. It just means that your body has learned how to produce self-doubt or have that kind of schema so that you can get by in life.
Is there a DBT thing for this?
Yeah, they have a couple things, but the one that leaps to mind is mindfulness to thought, or they call it allowing the mind, which means like one way I do this with my students is I say, okay, close your eyes. Everybody close your eyes. And when we meet, never mind. Everybody close your eyes. And I want you to imagine that there's a spider, a big hairy one that's on the table in front of you. And it's actually walking towards you. It's walking towards you. And it's about to step onto your hand. And it's right there. And it isn't stepping, it's sort of still, but it's right there. And its legs are coming right at your hand. Right.
You ever have some people who have phobias of spiders say, fuck you,
Yeah,
I'm not going to do that?
Yes. And so
that would be really rough for someone who had a phobia of spiders. Like my wife, for example, she'd be like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. And if people don't want to do it, I say, fine. Cause trigger warning and all, like, I don't want to,
like you could change it to like a snake or something for those people.
Or, but you could have, anything, right? Anything. The point of it, yes. And everything you're saying, I agree with you. And the point is that for many of us, what'll happen is our heart rate will change simply because we're imagining a thing. Like we're making it real by imagining it. So that's the power of the mind. And the mind is doing that. The mind is doing that because I open my eyes and there's no spider on the table. There's nothing on the table. There's just the table. When I have self-doubt, that's like this thing that I generate, like a virtual reality, if that's an okay way to put it, that I act from. And so the DBT skill is allowing the mind, which isn't to say block that or try to rationalize away from it, because anytime you try to do that, you just give it power. It's to say, yeah, that's that thought that I have, and step anyways. Yep, that's that thing that I always think, and step anyways. That's that schema or whatever mindset or whatever you want to call it that I always have, and I can step anyways because it's just neural firings of my brain.
Do you have a lot of self-doubt given your childhood?
Yeah.
What's that like? You don't seem like a self-doubting person.
Oh, I totally do, don't I?
No, you seem like a confident. I've always thought you as a confident fella.
Oh no. I don't know how to answer this. This is a big one. Not big like I'm not sure where to start. Yeah, I have a lot of self-doubt. Like in my creative endeavors, I will work on them for a while and then I fill with self-doubt and I find myself with my own little story. My spider walking across the table is, this isn't any good and I can't finish it and I'm never going to get done. And even if I do, I don't know what this is and blah, 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 blah. And so if I get stuck in that, I'll be paralyzed and I won't move. And the best thing for me to do is, like if it's writing, stick my pen on the paper and move my hand across the page and keep doing that. Even if what comes out is just scribble, it doesn't really matter, right? What matters is the step. It's just the outcome doesn't matter. It's what am I doing right now? It's what I'm doing right now. That's probably more important than any kind of result.
Do you have self-doubt in regular everyday life?
Yeah. Work, marriage, friends.
Yeah. I guess with clients, we've consulted about cases and there are times when I will detect, or you'll even say that you have a lot of self-doubt. And I'm like, Bob, you have nothing to doubt yourself on this. Consulting is good and being confused is fine, but self-doubt of like, maybe I'm not good enough for this. I'm always surprised that you think that about yourself, given how successful and how your clients love you so much.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to see the world the way the world sees us, isn't it? Or hard to see ourselves the way the world sees us. Yeah. Have you ever noticed that?
Yeah.
Julia Roberts said it best in Pretty Woman. The bad stuff's easier to believe. You ever noticed that?
I don't think I've ever heard someone quote Pretty Woman.
The wisdom of Pretty Woman.
I remember the soundtrack of that being kind of good. Let me look it up.
Roy Orbison.
Woman soundtrack. Uh, Natalie Cole, Go West, King of Wishful Thinking, great song. Roxette, It Must Have Been Love.
Yeah.
Peter Cetera, Red Hot Chili Peppers, David Bowie, Fame 90s remix. Oh no. Robert Palmer, Christopher Oatkasic, Real Wild Child, Real, and then Pretty Women, Roy Orbison. That's not that amazing. The soundtrack I really remember is from Pretty in Pink. Maybe that's what I was thinking.
Oh, Pretty in Pink,
like
sure.
Pretty Woman and Pretty in Pink, they kind of sound, but they're completely different movies. Yeah. OMD, Psychedelic Furs, Echo and the Bunnymen, Joe Jackson, Suzanne Vega, NXS, New Order, The Smiths, Please Please Me, or Please Let Me Get What I Want. Wonderful. Did you ever have a soundtrack? I feel like soundtracks back in the day were like really important because they were kind of like compilation albums that you could just buy one cassette and you'd get like 10 bands. Did you have a big soundtrack when you were a kid that you listened to?
Star Wars.
You listened to Star Wars?
We had the two vinyl record set. Yeah, man. My brother got it for Christmas from our aunt. She gave him Star Wars soundtrack. She gave me Donnie and Marie. Oh, that was terrible.
Were you too old for Donnie and Marie?
Yeah, but it was fucking Donnie and Marie. Blech.
But I don't when
I don't even think Danny had seen Star Wars. I had seen it like 3 times. When he gets the Star Wars album, he'll still laugh about that.
Because he's younger or older?
He's younger than me. Yeah, a couple years younger. He'll laugh. He'll say, "Yeah, you got Donnie and Marie."
And for those who don't know, the Osmonds were, it's interesting that some things from decades last in terms of cultural awareness, and some don't. I mean, because I bet you most millennials don't even know who the Osmonds are, but the Osmonds were ginormous in the 70s. I mean, just dominated the entire family. The Osmond Show, Donny Osmond, Marie Osmond. I mean, it was all Donny and Marie Osmond and all their things. And you look back at it and it's just so goofy. They would take really great music and make it very white, like the whitest of white, Mormon white, you know what I mean?
White. Yeah.
Because they're a Mormon family. And lo and behold, they had, anyway. But my family ate that crap up, because
70s.
It was maybe one of the better shows on TV at the time. I mean, because the other shows were Lawrence Welk, which I never understood why anyone would watch that show. And they had comedy routines. It's very family friendly. Yeah. But it's just interesting how, because other things in the 70s that what else in the 70s was kind of contained? Because you could say Michael Jackson, but of course Michael Jackson extended to the 80s, 90s, and beyond. But what in the 70s, when millennials and younger people think of the 70s, what do you think they think about?
Oh, Rocky.
What they think of Rocky?
I don't know. What
are the big things that kind of disco?
Disco, yeah. Star Wars, 1976, right?
Yeah. Jaws.
Pet Rocks. They probably don't even know what.
Did you have a pet rock?
No, I never had that.
Oh, I did. I think everyone in my family had a pet rock. They were only like $4.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know, 6 or something. So if you don't know and you're younger than us, then there was this fad in the mid 70s of this thing called a pet rock, where you would go to the store, and it was in this little box, like a Happy Meal. And there was a rock in there. It was usually a nice looking round rock, but it was just a rock. And it was in a bed of sawdust to kind of keep it from rattling around. And there was an instruction manual as well. In fact, I listened to a whole podcast about just that instruction manual, because it was a big deal, this instruction manual. And for a summer, everyone was buying pet rocks and they were running out of pet rocks. And it was just the dumbest thing because it's like you're selling a rock.
A rock.
It's just a rock. Go outside, pick up a rock, make it your pet rock. But because it was embedded in American marketing and materialism and capitalism, like, and it had a snappy looking font on the box, and it was a craze, and it was like Beanie Babies kind of a thing.
Right.
And I had a pet rock.
You had a pet rock.
And I thought it was pretty special. Probably just for a day. I don't know how long it lasted, but yeah, it's just interesting how certain things will last. Like in the 80s, people think of popping your collar. They think of neon. They think of Michael Jackson. They think of Madonna. They think of, that kind of stuff. But then there are certain things from the 80s that just did not last. I think of Back to the Future. And I'm just trying to think of like other things from the 80s that were huge at the time, but just fizzled in terms of cultural awareness.
Reebok sneakers.
Okay. Yeah.
Reeboks. Remember that? I used to sell those.
Right. There's a time when Reeboks were more popular than Nike, right?
Yeah.
They were gigantic.
They had the soft leather, and like you said, that kind of hard leather or whatever. Yeah, that was the thing about Reeboks.
Yeah. What else from the 80s? Write in, let me know, or comment below what you think. Yeah, Atari. Well, certainly I think Atari awareness is still around. There's young people that are aware of Atari. You know what I mean?
Right. Rubik's Cubes. The kids know those.
People know about Rubik's Cubes. Yeah. I'm just going to Google 80s things.
80s things.
50 things. Oh, okay. This is great. 50 things only people who lived in the 80s will remember. This is good. Fanny packs, but of course, everyone knows about fanny packs. MTV, everyone knows about MTV. Constantly anticipating nuclear war. That I actually think will be lost to history, because I hear younger people talking today about how dumb we were in the 80s. And I'm like, we were not dumb. It was real, my friend.
Yeah.
Like it was almost like a foregone conclusion that we were all going to die.
I took my first semester in college. I took this philosophy class, and one of the books was about the inevitability of nuclear war.
Yeah.
We just didn't know when.
Especially Reagan. He was making active threats in the beginning of his in his first term about the evil empire, and it just looked like, this is how it's going to end. And the one consolation that I remember thinking at the age of like 10 was that Seattle would get hit first, because we're, in terms of ballistic missiles, we're pretty close to Soviet Union. Yeah. And we have a lot of military bases around here and a lot of industry, Boeing and whatnot.
Right.
So I would die in a flash. I wouldn't know it happened. And I remember thinking that was, imagine it. And of course, today you have kids in the pandemic and blah, 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 and mass shooting. So it's not like kids today don't have, probably a lot worse to some extent, because it's more visceral, I think. But anyway, another thing.
Did you do duck and cover drills when you were
absolutely. Well, in the 70s, but by the time in the 80s, I think that had become passe.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. If you don't know about that, there was this program in schools that was taught about duck and cover. Like, if in case of a nuclear war, you get under your desk, which is absurd. And it was all basically a way of placating the masses and making you feel like you had control. And you'd just be a pile of ash under a desk instead of not under the desk. But another thing they have here on the list is MASH. MASH was I bet you anything younger people today have a very tertiary understanding of MASH, right?
Yeah.
Did you watch MASH?
Yeah.
I definitely would watch it. And as a young person, but I think it went over my head a lot,
Right.
I've said before that you're kind of like Hawkeye, and you didn't like that. I remember I said you were like Hawkeye. You're like, oh my God, no.
Worst ever. No, MASH just was on the TV the other day, and I'm like, I can't stand MASH. Colin's like, why? Is it Alan Alda? I'm like, yes, I hate that. No.
Are you seeing something in yourself? Because you're a wisecracker.
I'd like to think I was funny and I had less ego, but that was the Alan Alda ego hour, man.
You don't have that ego, but you're definitely a one-liner. Like, you're definitely a one-liner guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know. Like, I think you should accept the comparison.
You're just a mean person.
The debut of the Macintosh Super Bowl commercial. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Lady Diana becoming Princess Diana. I think.
Oh yeah, right.
Coke reinventing the recipe.
I remember that.
So I think that might be, but everyone understands Coke and Pepsi. I don't think young people today. Max Headroom.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure that young people do not understand Max Headroom. The very first, so just a tangent here, a tangent on a tangent. My girlfriend in high school was like a little Barbara Streisand, and that was her whole identity, was like drama, and she had a beautiful voice, big voice, small girl. And she was a lot older than me, a couple of years older than me, and she was about to graduate from high school. She's 12th, I was 10th grade, and she wanted me to sing a duet with her in the talent show at the end of the year. And I was like, no, that's just no. I'm not going to sing. I'm not a singer. I'm not I'm a jock. I'm a football player. I'm captain of the football team. I play wrestling. I'm a dude, bro. I wear baseball caps. Well, I mean, I was a preppy. Anyway, point is I was terrified. But she like roped me into it. She's like, no, you got to do it, because she would hear me singing in the car through the radio. And she's like, you actually have a good voice. I'm like, no, I don't. And so she convinced me to do it. And I'm like, and I only did it for her, because I'm just like, well, she wants me to. So I did it. And it was, long story short, incredibly terrifying. I mean, I'm about to go on stage. I mean, so she was so comfortable on stage. Not only did she sing on stage, but she was in charge of the whole talent show. She was like the MC and the interstitial entertainment person. Like, she just loved it. And I'm just like, do not get me on, keep me away from the stage. Like, no. And when I'm I'm waiting in the wings while she's like, dancing around stage all the time. And then there comes the very end. We were like the finale, because it was this romantic song duet. If anyone's curious, it's Somewhere Out There from, I think, American Tail.
American Tail.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm. Linda Ronstadt and what's his name? Anyway. And
who is that guy? Michael somebody.
Golly. Somewhere Out There singers. James Ingram. Yeah. And I was waiting in the wings, and I was very close to, when it was time for me to go on stage, running out the backstage door and never coming back to town. I was so scared. Anyway, it went well. It went fine. And it was kind of gratifying to do. And I instantly decided to form a band, and there were other guys musicians in the talent show. And I just went up to them and I said, hey, let's start a band. And they're like, okay. So and then a little bit later, there was a battle of the bands at our high school it was an all-nighter party at the high school, like a dance. And we're going to do battle of the bands. And so we entered, and it was a very, very stupid thing to do, because we were not good and we had not practiced enough. I mean, for years, I always kind of was operating on this assumption that talented bands and musicians were just innately good. But it took me until I was like in my 30s or 40s to realize that all good bands practice a lot. They rehearse a lot. And I just never really understood that in order to sound good on stage, you have to actually put in the work, And at the time, we just thought, well, we've had 1.5 practices. We should be fine. And we were going to sing. I was the singer, and we were going to play I Saw Her Standing There by the Beatles, which is not an easy song to play musically. But so we were terrible. We get on stage and we're performing, and I'm singing completely off key. And my Barbra Streisand girlfriend is cringing the entire time. She's like, I got off stage. She's like, you were a fifth high the entire time. You were singing a harmony of the song. And I'm like, oh God. Chris Huber, drummer, you've met him. Mm-hmm. He dropped his sticks, and they went flying across the floor of the gym and went under the bleachers, and he didn't have an extra set. So he in the middle, and we didn't stop the song. We just like kept soldiering on without drums. The guitarist was so inept and just not practiced like me. He sat on his amp, one, and two, just stopped playing. And so the bassist was the only one playing. It was a pretty good bass part. It's Paul's bass part. It was a disaster. But Bob, here's the kicker. We were the only band that entered the Battle of the Bands. So we won. And one of the things that we won was a bunch of Coca-Cola swag. And one of the things in that Coca-Cola swag was a Max Headroom shirt, which brings us all the way back to Max Headroom.
What was the girlfriend's name?
Sarah.
With an H?
With an H.
Oh,
yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah. Let's see. Reagan's assassination attempt, creating a mixtape. But I feel like young people today know about the concept of making a mixtape. Jane Fonda. Now, there we go. So aerobics. I bet you young people today don't know of the phenomenon that was aerobics in the 80s and Jane Fonda. I bet you who's Jane Fonda? I'm guessing that, but that was everyone in the 80s knew about aerobics and Jane Fonda. Blues Brothers, the movie. I bet you a lot of young people today aren't really aware of blues. That was a humongous cultural phenomenon, right? First VCR, Garfield. Oh, maybe I wonder if young people know about Garfield. He was, Garfield was a phenomenon.
Well, Bill Murray did those movies a while back, so maybe.
But that was in the 90s, I think. So it was a long time ago. Exxon Valdez oil spill. Ferris Bueller. I don't know. I feel like young people know about Ferris. Mr. T. I bet you a lot of people don't know about Mr. T.
Mr. T.
And the A-Team, right?
You know how he got his start?
Wasn't he a bouncer?
Yeah, he was on a TV show like America's Toughest Bouncer or something like that, and he won. And anyways, yeah.
The Just Say No campaign, Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, Rubik's Cube, Greed is Good, Hands Across America. Do you remember Hands Across America?
I do.
Worshipping Hairbands, the Cabbage Patch Doll. I bet you that's one thing that young people haven't heard about. Do you remember the Cabbage Patch Doll thing?
Yeah, actually, I knew somebody whose mom was like instrumental in creating them.
What do you mean?
Like she made them.
She like designed them?
Or something like that, yeah.
Wow. Was she rich?
No, I don't think so.
Cassette tapes, trying to find out who shot JR. Oh, I bet you that's the show Dallas. Okay, that's a perfect example. Like everyone understands Back to the Future. There are 18-year-olds today who have seen back, or at least they're aware of the movie Back to the Future.
It's a good movie.
But Dallas was bigger. It was a much bigger cultural phenomenon than Back to the Future was. Back to the Future was a movie that came out in a random summer in the mid 80s. Dallas was watched by everyone and it was talked about all the time. Everyone's like, Dallas, who shot JR? And I would bet most young people have no idea what Dallas is, the TV show, or who JR was, that kind of.
Who did shoot JR? I can't even remember.
Well, I was too young to watch that.
Well, let's Google it. Who shot JR?
Who shot JR? Kristen Shepard, revealed to be Kristen Shepard. So I think scheming sister-in-law and mistress.
Who played her? Do we know? Was that Victoria Principal?
Mary Crosby.
Oh, Mary Crosby,
yeah. The Birth of 24-Hour News, trying to learn how to break dance, the Challenger explosion. I feel like most young people probably know. The Super Bowl Shuffle. Yeah, I bet you probably not a lot of people know about the Super Bowl.
The Bears, right?
Yeah. Baby Jessica falling down the well. Do you remember that?
No.
Neither do I. Hitting the arcade at Friday night. I don't know. I feel like most young people probably know about that. Listening to Do They Know It's Christmas? I don't even know what that is.
That's at Bob Geldof.
Oh, do they know it's Christmas time at all? Right. Yeah, that's a great song. Tawny Katane flying on top of a car.
Oh, yeah, Whitesnake.
Right. She is not with us anymore, by the way.
Mm.
David Letterman introducing the world to Velcro.
Oh yeah.
What?
Velcro. His sidekick Larry Bud Melman would put himself in a Velcro suit and he'd run and jump and just stick to a wall.
Yeah, I guess that is, and that's what they're saying. I don't remember that, but that is kind of interesting to think about how Velcro was introduced in the 80s. Like suddenly everything was Velcro shoes,
Velcro shoes,
Velcro coats, Velcro everything. And you're just
That's
like, oh
right.
my God, Velcro is the best.
Yeah.
It's like tape you can reuse, you know?
Yeah.
Cutting up perfectly good clothes to redesign them. I feel like young people probably know about the Chernobyl disaster.
Oh, do they know about? Oh, that's the 90s. Never mind.
What?
Crisscross, wear your pants backwards.
Yeah, I bet you that didn't last in terms of cultural awareness. The Miracle on Ice. Yeah, they probably put that, I don't know. Wearing down vest no matter what time of year.
Oh, sure. I had one of those.
I feel like that wasn't a Seattle thing. I feel like we didn't really do that.
We got cold in Philadelphia, so.
Yeah. Dieting with Elizabeth Taylor. Playing a Nintendo Game Boy. I feel like that's more of a 90s.
That's the 90s.
Yeah. Sometimes you can tell like, oh, this was written by a millennial. You know what I mean? Because like,
they don't have the dates right.
Yeah, because you and I instantly like, I think Game Boy is more of a 90s. I mean, I'm guessing it came out in the 80s, but I never played a Game Boy. My little brother did.
How about a Game Boy for $135 in 1991? It was awesome.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting. So you would have been in your mid 20s at that point.
Early 22 or 3, 23
so you bought your own Game Boy as why? Because you're not a video game person.
I like video games back then. We had a Mattel Intellivision.
Oh yeah, Intellivision.
Oh
yeah. So that's another. So that's probably
cool.
That's probably something that is lost. Like people understand Nintendo and Atari, which came out in the 80s, but not a lot of people know about Intellivision. Television was so much cooler than an Atari. Like when the Atari was just gangbusters, there was this alternative game system that had, I think, better electronics or something. And the games were super cool. Yeah, my neighbor had an Intellivision, and the controller had so many more options on it.
That thing was hard to use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it had like a round, a silver disc that you used to move things around. But then you also had it was so cool. And I kind of wish video games would do this today, where there was this keypad above and you would slide in this cover to tell you what they would custom the buttons,
like the baseball game had certain, like it was a keypad, like 0 to 10 or 0 to 9 or whatever. And if they had to keep the thing card just slide over for like baseball or whatever.
Right. It really increased the options of control over the game,
They made these aftermarket joystick things that you could put on top of that disc, so you could use because Atari joystick was far superior controller.
Right.
Danny and me, we had a really hard time with that thing, and we would just wear them out because we press so hard. You know how you get when you're playing a video game, you press really hard as if that's going to do more. Yeah. Remember that game Pitfall? Oh, that was so fun.
Oh yeah, I got that for my birthday at the age of like 12 or 13, and yeah, that was a great game.
Yeah.
Madonna.
Yeah.
Watching that tennis showdown between Bjorn Borg and
John McEnroe at Wimbledon.
I don't remember that.
Yeah. Longest tiebreaker, I think, in history or something like that. Just unbelievable.
Slogan T-shirts like "Choose Life" with Wham. Proudly sporting mullets. And I feel like young people. This might have been written by younger. The Berlin Wall coming down. Acid wash jeans.
The Berlin Wall came down in the 90s. 92, I think.
See what I mean? It's like, but of course, most journalists are younger than us at this point.
Right. Oh yeah. Right.
Walkman, members only jackets, Air Jordans, a Merlin. Did you have a Merlin?
No, I had a knockoff called Touch Me. It was cool.
Touch Me.
Yeah.
Garbage Pail Kids. I was super into Garbage Pail Kids, and I bet you anything young people have no idea what Garbage Pail Kids.
I don't know what that is.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
There were these stickers that were like alternative art, essentially, and they were playing off of the Cabbage Patch Kids. And so there were these cute pictures of babies, and they had different names. So like, for example, they had Kirk, and it was Berserk Kirk.
Yes.
And it was this garbage pail kid, like he was a werewolf or something. And so it was really popular in 1981 or something. Trapper Keeper, Rubik's Cube, Fisher Price cassette player, Atari, Scratch and Sniff stickers. Do you remember Scratch and Sniff stickers?
Yes.
So I bet you anything that is lost to history. Slap Bracelet, Spirograph, Big League Chew, Swatches, Teddy Ruxpin, Leg Warmers, Lolo Ball. I don't know what that is. Jelly Shoes. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, all right, Bob. Well, that does it for that weird episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because
You deserve it.